Hey everybody, Brendan here. Welcome back to another tournament game video. Today we are going to be covering round number 2 of the Quebec Open, Quebec Open under 2000 section, which makes it not sound like it's an open tournament. It is, but anyways. So yeah, I'm playing in round number 2 now. I have a 1 out of 1 so far. I won my first game, which is nice. And it was a very interesting and key theoretical line for those that play the semi-Slav. Now I am playing with the white pieces against Daniel. Let's see how it goes. I play my normal e4, as always. Well, not as always. I did flirt around with d4 earlier in the year, but I kind of gave it up and stuck with e4 because I realized that I have a better understanding of e4, and it's not that you should avoid things you don't have a good understanding of, but it's more like I was having more fun with e4 anyways, and if I wanted to put in work for something, I'd rather put in work on my e4 openings instead, because there was less to learn. Alright, so now we see c5, the Sicilian, knight f3, and knight c6, so a classical Sicilian, not a classical Sicilian, my apologies, but bringing the knight to c6, obviously it allows potential classical Sicilians. It also allows Sveshnikovs, and also things like Taimanov. So if I play something like d4, there's lots of things that can be played. There could be knight f6, there could be e5, there could be d6, there could be e6. There's lots of reasonable moves. Of course, I play d6, as you guys know. But after bishop to b5, which is what I played, well, there's a new move that I'm playing. All of a sudden, I'm not playing as many open Sicilians. I still do, but there's some positions where I'm no longer playing into, again, opens. And that's specifically when there's a knight on c6. Because when there's a knight on c6, now I can play the Rossolimo. And the Rossolimo is a very interesting attempt at an advantage. And it's something that I was new with. I had studied for very little time before the game. And I immediately deviate from what I intended to be my opening repertoire. So we see g6, and I immediately deviate. So now I play bishop takes c6. But here, I didn't know what the move should be. So I end up playing c3, which is also fine. After c3, we see knight f6. I play queen e2, just to defend everything. Bishop g7. I castle. My opponent castles. And then I play h3. And the idea of h3 is if they play some sort of even d5 here, then I can consider e5, let's just say knight e8, and then I can also consider a move like d4. And the idea is that we're transposing essentially into an alpin where black has fianchettoed the bishop, and this is not really how you should play, because the bishop is just totally blunted here, and white definitely has a slight edge. Alright, so queen b6 was played, which was a bit surprising. And, well, we see that my opponent has a 900 rating. So I wasn't really expecting much. I was like, oh, okay, this looks like a reasonable opening. I just play a normal move, rook d1, because, well, I want to go d4. And I just completely missed the next move. Later on, or earlier on, even though I see that his rating is so low, there's one important thing to mention. I did check out my opponent online before the game, and I saw that they were rated like 22, 2300, but 900 over the board. What this tells me is they're actually pretty strong, and I'm taking on all risk, and of course no reward. If I win the game, that's expected because of the rating, like how the ratings work. So because of that, I would still lose a ton of rating if I lost. And if I, again, win, nothing, even though they are really strong. And of course, they take advantage of my move here. Knight takes e4. So I'm on the back foot, ready to resign already. I end up not resigning because I realize this is a perfect chance for me to try out these positions a little bit. And also, most importantly, see if I can create just a little bit of counterplay. I think one thing that people should actually work on more, and that I've intended to work on more is if you're worse, like significantly, it's so easy to resign. It just takes one extend of the arm and handshake. But I don't think that's the right strategy. I'm down a pawn, sure, and that's not good. But how many positions have you been up a pawn or up a piece and lost the game? How many have I? I've lost plenty of games up pawns, up pieces, completely winning. So it's worth playing on. Like, okay, if I lose, then I lose, right? Right now, if I resign, it's a guaranteed loss. If I play on, it's not guaranteed. It's losing, but it's not guaranteed. So I just try to play the best I can. I took on c6. I just wanted to create an imbalance here, so at least it's not like equal material. This is probably not the best try. Maybe retreating the bishop or even playing something like d4 for some activity is better. But my idea here was that if I instead play bishop takes c6, there's an imbalance, and queen takes c6 is forced, of course. And I thought for a second I was going to be able to win e7. And I was happy because I played d3. I played it relatively quickly. But my opponent plays knight f6. And I realize I can't take the pawn. If I take the pawn, rook e8, and then, okay, then it's time to resign. That is definitely a time. So I can't do that. So I realized, oh no, I just like exchanged also, which maybe not be the best idea. One thing that you should keep in mind is when you're down material, you don't want to exchange pieces. You want to exchange pawns. The reason why is because let's just say we take off every single piece from the board right now and make it a king and pawn ending. Well, now it's an easy win for black. Just because they're up an extra pawn, they can use that extra pawn to sacrifice, to deflect my king and make it babysit that pawn. There's a lot of potential ways to win when you're just up a pawn. So that's not good. But again, it creates an imbalance, and also I thought I was winning e7, and now I realize, okay, I'm going to go back to an old strategy of mine, because first off, I'm on tilt, and second off, I want to try to keep some chances alive. So my idea here is I'm going to play really fast and just force my opponent to solve any problems I come up with. I'll just think on their time, I'll be really focused, and well, again, I'm losing. So I'm just going to use every potential advantage I can think of. I'm going to try to be faster than them and just like create a little bit of initiative. And arguably there is a little bit of initiative for white. You know, we have the open file. Our rook on d1 isn't so bad. Again, it's 100% losing. Bishop to f4. Okay, knight d5. I go bishop h2. I didn't want to bring it to g3 just because I don't know if f5, f4 or something. So this was my idea. And also with this move, let's just say they make a silly one like knight f6. Now we're fine. Not fine. We're probably slightly worse, but it's not as bad now. We can take on e7. And the idea is if they go rook e8, we have queen d6. And that's the idea of bishop f4. We're just trying to create problems. So rook e8 was played. Natural move. Again, just avoiding anything there. Because if they play something else like b6, then again we can consider something like c4. c4 doesn't quite work because there's also the move knight b4, which is really annoying. And if we go queen takes c7 in this line, there's always knight c2 at the end. A funny move that's actually recommended is queen e6. Or after queen takes c6, d takes e6 here. The problem is bishop takes b2 at the end of the line is a problem as well. Alright, so rook e8, knight b d2. Again, just continuing with development. d6, I think this is a very good move. Just natural, developing the bishop and also kind of blunting ours. Knight f1, e5, and here I go c4. And I thought c4 was interesting because I'm trying to, again, create some imbalance where, let's just say in the future, they want to play something like d5. Maybe e5 will be weak. Maybe not, but maybe. And also, I'm trying to close things down. So if they play d5, I'll just ignore it. And I want to objectively try to get some sort of completely locked structure where I have 2 knights and they have 1. We see knight c7, going for e6 to d4, most likely. Knight e3. Now knight e6 doesn't make as much sense because we can play knight d5. F5 now, which is really strong because they're, again, just gaining space. This looks like just a normal King's Indian at this point, actually, where white's down a pawn, and a very important one in that, and with less space. I play knight e1 because I didn't really see a choice. I wanted to bring the knight maybe to c2, and also maybe play something like knight f1. We'll see. Like, I'm just trying to avoid any direct confrontation with knight e1. Be a bit cagey. f4. Now knight f1. Knight e6. And now knight f3. So with knight f3 here, if they play knight d4, I should probably take it. That's my idea here. But I'm just trying to, again, complicate things and keep it a little messy. I thought that this might not actually be the worst thing in the world for me. It is. Again, it's always losing. They have like g5, g4, for example. This is really strong and winning. They go g5 instead. I go rook e1. Trying to complicate knight d4. Now if knight d4, they'd have to take with the c-pawn, which is still fine. This is totally winning. My idea, though, was maybe I'll get e4, though, as a response. And then I can argue that the knight on e4, I'm trying to take control of light squares. This doesn't matter. They can just go bishop f5 and snap off our piece immediately. We should probably not even take with the queen here, but if we don't, then they get a protected passer. And again, it's recommended that we take with the pawn, sometimes, according to the engine. But yeah, like rook takes e4, and yeah, we can see that this isn't going to end well. Because, well, they still have a lot of activity. They can always go for d5. They can always try to go for b5 as well. There's a lot of active plans. But okay, rook e1. Just trying to make it, like, slightly harder for my opponent. Knight 3d2. Oh, sorry, my apologies. Nope, that's not it. There's something I actually wanted to show here with rook e1. There's something I remember that I wrote down after that I was hoping to see in the game, and that was the move h5. I think h5 is fine, of course. Most things are winning in this position, but I thought I had a chance to make it messy here. And I start that with knight to d2. And the idea with knight to d2 is I'm simply just attacking e4. And they don't really want to push. They could go g4 here, though. But if they go h4, all of a sudden, maybe I can, like, jump in. I would probably even consider sacrificing an exchange with, like, queen h5 here. Again, when you're losing, making things messy is probably the best bet, at least in a position like this. There's no reason to ever go extremely passive or anything. Just like I'm trying to force my opponent into making some sort of concessions to force a win, or at least keep things open for mistakes. My opponent plays knight d4, which I was really happy to see, and I think this is practically maybe not the best choice. Maybe they should go for h4 and knight d4. And there's also an argument for g4, which still is very promising, because if takes, there's actually knight d4, queen d1, and then takes back. And the attack's just crashing through at this point. This is lost. So, knight d4, I take on h5, which I was happy to do, and I do not care that they win an exchange. Because after queen takes g5, all of a sudden, okay, let's look at the remaining material. I am down in exchange, but I have a pawn. And that's how we can look at the position, is it's an exchange for a like they're only up 1 point of material still, so it's an even trade, and this is still winning, but now it's a little less clear. So I feel like I've achieved something here, and I was actually pretty happy. The rook on a8's not doing much. We can see like knight e4 come into the position, and now that I have 2 knights here, if we can imagine like a knight getting to d5 and this bishop gone, then that feels pretty good. There's still a lot of work to do. We're still losing. So now my opponent plays rook f8. I play rook to e1, natural move. And now is my chance to jump. My opponent plays bishop f5. And now we go from losing to drawing. And we can also see that my opponent is pretty low on time as well. So I was playing quickly, and my opponent was not. We're doing pretty well on time, and now we have a good opportunity here to make things really messy, but also not just messy, it's concretely good for us. We can take on f4. The reason why is because after takes, there's this move rook e7, and f5 is actually the worst square for the bishop because they have to play rook f7 to defend mate, but the second they do, we can take it and then take on f5. We're actually winning now in this position. So of course they can't take on f4. And this might not look good because they can take on d3. Turns out that does not matter. We're actually very happy to make this exchange. The reason why is because now d6 could be a target. And also, now taking the f4 pawn was a big deal because now this knight on f1 is no longer a chump. Bishop takes d3. I played bishop e3, natural move. Just defending the piece. I prefer g3 because I wanted to play knight g3. We see rook f6. I go knight g3. The problem is I have to deal with some sort of rook g6 with queen takes g2 mate. So knight g3 just defends that. Rook g6. Queen h5. And now rook f8. Okay, so they have some activity, but we're not doing so bad now either. Things are pretty messy. I end up playing knight f3 here because now I want to go knight h4. And again, my goal is, it's even at this point, but my opponent's down pretty low on time, and I can continue to try to push, actually. It feels like white has an initiative with some sort of knight h4 coming. And it turns out that's true. The only move to maintain equality now is queen e8, arguably. Queen a4 supposedly does as well. But the most important move here is queen e8. We're after b3 to defend c4 finally. They have a few moves now that equalize, like rook takes g3, giving back the exchange, or even bishop f6, for example, and b5. And the important part is that with the queen on e8, there's not as many problems with rook d1, which is something that should be mentioned, because rook d1 would harass the bishop and potentially win the rook. So, queen e8 is very important. Queen a4 is also interesting because they're just trying to go for the queen side, which again does work, but I think the more interesting thing to point out is what I mentioned. My apologies, one sec. Ooh, there we go. Okay. So after knight to f3, now is our chance to pounce. They have to go a little passive here, and they're low on time. And actually, they blunder with queen d7. Queen d7 was a good idea because the idea is going to potentially f7, also to cover the f5 square. There's a lot of pros about the move, but it actually fundamentally loses to a key move from us. And there's one move that's better than all the others, and that's rook d1. After rook d1, the bishop doesn't really have a good place to go. We're always threatening some sort of knight h4. We also have bishop takes c5 as a potential threat. We also have, well, not really knight takes e5 because their bishop is also covering it. But we can see that this bishop is just horribly placed. My opponent plays bishop f5. If bishop c2, we can just go rook d2. Bishop b1 is a computer line here. Just knight h4 though. Rook e6. And then the funny move queen d1. And again, bishop takes c5. I don't think this is totally unreasonable. At least knight h4 is very natural. And I think if bishop e1 were played, then I don't think queen d1's so ridiculous, because now bishop takes c5 is a huge problem. And yeah, best move apparently is queen e7, where after knight f3, the bishop goes back. Let's just say to h7. Now knight to g5 is a problem. And again, we're just going on the attack. We're just like, this is going to end really badly. Because again, there's always potential rook takes d6s in the air. The initiative is starting to play itself at this point. Alright, so rook d1, bishop f5, and now we just win our exchange back immediately. And because we win our exchange back, we're winning it under amazing circumstances because we're up a pawn. If like we're up a pawn, but we're down on exchange right now. So if we win back our exchange, we're just up a pawn. And our pawns here are doing much better than theirs. Like, it feels like we have 2 pawns up because of the g2 and the h3 pawns. It feels like they're just going to promote. That's not far from the truth. So after bishop f5, I took on f5. They can't take with the rook, which is what they want to do, because then I don't have knight h4. But of course I have queen takes g6. So queen takes f5. I just trade. And then knight h4. And this is the problem. Is now, all of a sudden, we went from completely lost to winning. Rook f6 was played. I took. And then I played g4. And this is hopefully clear now why it's winning. Because we're just going to start escorting these pawns down the board. And it doesn't even necessarily matter that these pawns get through, because with all of that activity, we can start probing on the other side for weaknesses as well, if we really needed to. So king f7 was played. g5 is interesting, because if g5, bishop f6, for example, we can just play h4. We're fine. We don't have to worry about bishop takes g5 stuff now. That's a little too tricky for me. I just want to be secure. So I play king g2. Now, I was expecting e4 or something like that. I was pretty happy to see e4. I was just going to play some sort of b3 and like rook d5 and just take advantage of the fact that this pawn's also weak. And then after rook d5, I can consider g5, h4, h5, for example, which is a completely winning plan. Instead, king e6 was played. Now king f3, which I was happy to play. I'm not scared of rook f6. I just, I could consider king e4 here, which is actually totally fine. And again, we can start trying to make progress with our pawns. Now the rook is a little awkward actually, and might get hit with g5. So bishop f6 was played instead. And bishop f6, I think, had the idea of bishop h4 or bishop g5. Probably bishop h4 to try to blockade the pawns. But I had an idea that I was pretty happy with finding rook g1. And now bishop h4 doesn't really work. And bishop g5 doesn't make as much sense either, because we can take and play h4. And this should just be totally winning. But bishop h4, and there's a move here, g5, which just traps the bishop. There's like a ton of winning moves. It doesn't really matter the specifics, but I was pretty happy here. Because even after king f5 and rook g4, even if we trade and I give back my pawn and it's equal material, I calculated this as winning, and that's true. They could try e4 check. They end up taking everything here. Oh, sorry, I actually took the rook. Rook takes, bishop takes, king e4, king h4, king d5, king takes h3, king takes d6, king g2. And this was what I had to calculate ahead of time that I was a little worried about. Because if I take on e5, yeah, this is actually winning. But, you know, they're like, I don't want to take any chances. I was a little concerned here that maybe they get in or something. Or like they can make enough counterplay by the time I'm trying to scoop up all the pawns. That doesn't actually happen, but I was calculating from afar. I end up settling with king takes c5 because I noticed that they can't actually defend e5. And by the time they're close enough to my queenside pawns, it doesn't matter because I play b4, c5, b5, c6. So they're way too slow. e4. And this is something I had to see. King d4. King d5 I think also worked. It didn't really matter. Just the point of if they take on f2, I have to take on e4. King f3 here. And now I just go b4. Because now I'm going c5. And it doesn't matter how long they prevent it. They can prevent things as long as they want. Here I could just go, again, c5. And if they wait, it doesn't matter again because I go a4. And then I'm going b5 and then c6. I can always create a pass pawn. So b6 was played. But I played c5. And after it takes, and king takes f2. I don't blunder with c6. c6 makes no sense. I just take on e4, preventing counterplay. That's a good thing to mention. In king and pawn endings, if you can avoid a race, just avoid it, because then you're just like, you know, avoiding any complications. And yeah, this is winning, and my opponent ends up resigning. I think it was interesting because this was one of those times where it actually made sense to go back to old habits and move really quickly, because I was trying to put pressure on my opponent in every single way besides what is objectively best. If I play objectively best, I keep a solid position and eventually I just go down. This way, I was trying to create a little bit of threats, doing something called rocking the boat, which is like, you know, like shaking a boat. Like if you're in a little canoe or something, you're shaking it. Trying to make it messy. Then there's chances for mistakes. And I think sacrificing the exchange the way I did was actually pretty instructive, because even though I was still lost, I feel like that's a totally different position to win than when I was not down an exchange and instead up a pawn. Because imbalances, I feel, can favor the defender in some cases. Also completely untrue in others. But when you're down a clean pawn, making imbalances does make sense. And I think that the game was proof of that. I hope you guys enjoyed that one. That was an interesting one. I was really expecting to lose, and I was not happy with my play. And I was pretty concerned moving forward because my opponent was 900 and I almost lost. So I was very cautious for the rest of the tournament to make sure that something like this wouldn't happen. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you in round number 3. Bye-bye.